My boss congratulated me for quitting. I hadn't resigned. By lunch, a stranger was sitting at my desk. HR showed me an "I quit" email carrying my full employee profile, sent at 2:13 while I was asleep. My account showed nothing. Then security disabled my badge because they thought I'd broken back in. I was calling a lawyer when the receptionist finally checked the signature. It said Mark O., not Marco. A new employee named Mark had quit on his first day. The office directory had auto-filled the wrong Police called to say they'd found my stolen car. I was staring at it in my driveway. They read me the plate. It matched. Same color, same model, even the same dent on the rear door. I sent them a photo of my car with today's newspaper like it was being held hostage. An officer arrived, checked both VINs, and discovered the other driver had copied my plate after seeing my car online. Then he'd added the same dent to make the clone convincing. The weird part? The fake car contained 37 stolen garden gnomes. For the next month, strangers kept driving past my house to check whether I was the gnome thief. My neighbor still calls me the gnome father. My neighbor sent me a photo of my cat asleep on his couch. I don't own a cat. I walked over, and this orange cat greeted me like I was late. My neighbor said he'd been feeding him every morning because he thought he was mine. I'd been feeding the same cat every night because I thought he was his. We checked his collar. No tag. The vet scanned his chip and called his actual owner, who lived 3 streets away. She arrived carrying a photo album titled Milo's Other Families. Apparently Milo had 5 houses, 3 names, and a different dinner at each one. The next morning, he was back on my porch wearing a new tag that said, "Already fed." I thought my parents' dog had a sock in her mouth. She'd been suspiciously quiet beside the couch, with gray fabric hanging from her teeth. I used my serious voice and said, "Drop it." Then the sock blinked. She did. The sock hit the floor, unfolded 4 tiny legs, and sprinted under the coffee table. It was a live lizard. The dog wagged her tail like she'd brought me a present, while I moved every piece of furniture trying to catch it with a salad bowl. We finally got it outside, completely unharmed. The dog spent the rest of the afternoon waiting at the door for her new friend to come back. My blind date's sister picked her up. The date had gone perfectly. We joked about awful relationships, and I told 2 stories about my ex. One involved her skipping a huge family dinner to see me. The other involved her sneaking home late and accidentally letting the family dog escape. Then a car pulled up. My date smiled and said, "That's my sister." My ex rolled down the window and stared at both of us. An hour later, they were each texting me. My date had just realized every embarrassing story was about her sister. My ex had just realized I'd exposed both secrets. Somehow, my date still asked me out again. I booked our vacation to the wrong country because of one vowel. We were supposed to fly to Granada, Spain. I found cheap tickets, booked everything, and bragged for weeks about being the family travel expert. The night before our flight, my wife asked why our connection crossed the Atlantic. I checked the confirmation. I'd booked Grenada, the Caribbean island, not Granada. The airline wouldn't change it, so I bought last-minute tickets to Spain, then paid for a 4-hour cab because the new airport was nowhere near our hotel. Our teenager still thinks it was a weather delay. My wife calls it the most expensive spelling. My boss said, "I love you too." I had never said I loved him. During my internship, he asked me to find a tutorial. I found the right video, turned around, and mumbled, "I love YouTube." He froze, smiled awkwardly, and said, "I love you too." I stared at him. He stared at me. Then I realized he'd heard YouTube as you. I blurted, "YouTube." I said YouTube. He nodded way too quickly and sent me back to my desk. We never mentioned it again. But every time I opened YouTube, I blamed a parade for being late. My boss replied, "I know. I'm leading it." I'd overslept and picked the first excuse that sounded impossible to check. He asked which street. I said Main Street. He sent a photo of himself on a float beside a completely empty road. Then he zoomed in. My car was parked behind him because I'd stopped there for coffee 10 minutes earlier. I finally reached work, and my team was gathered around the photo. My boss had made it our group chat icon, and he asked if the parade was still holding me. I pretended it was my birthday for 12 minutes, and my boss gave a speech. At a work dinner, a coworker guessed my star sign. She was wrong, but looked so proud that I agreed. Then she asked my age. I said 20. She gasped, "So you turn 21 tomorrow?" I didn't want to embarrass her, so I nodded. 12 minutes later, the waiter brought cake, champagne, and the entire restaurant started singing. My boss called me the youngest talent on the team. My birthday was 5 months away. Monday morning, HR left a card on my desk. It said, "See you." I texted my landlord, "I love you," and he replied in 4 seconds. It was meant for my girlfriend, but his name was right above hers. Before I could explain, he wrote, "Rent is still due Friday." I sent 3 apologies. He reacted to everyone with a heart. Then my girlfriend looked over and asked why my landlord answered faster than she did. I showed her the messages. She changed his contact name to Other Boyfriend. The next morning, he sent a rent reminder and signed it. "Your favorite." My girlfriend paid him, then changed the Wi-Fi password. He still sends hearts.
I waved back at a stranger, and now I'm going to his wedding. He crossed the street, hugged me, and said, "Man, it's been years." I had no idea who he was, but I said, "Way too long." We exchanged numbers, then coffee, then drinks. 6 months later, his wedding invite arrived. I finally asked which school we went to. He said, "School?" I thought we met at work. Neither of us had worked at the same place. 2 strangers were too embarrassed to stop. I got into the wrong car and complained about the driver. I thought it was my boyfriend's red sedan, so I tossed in my groceries and started ranting about how late he was. The stranger waited for me to finish, then said, "I'm actually early for someone else." Before I could move, my boyfriend pulled up and honked. I grabbed my bags and told the stranger, "Thanks for the therapy." My boyfriend asked who he was. I said, "My new therapist." Now he texts me his license plate every time he picks me up. I accidentally liked my crush's photo from 6 years ago, so I liked all 214 of them. My logic was that one ancient like looked creepy, but 214 likes would look like an obvious joke. Halfway through, she messaged, "Are you okay?" I panicked and said my account had been hacked. She asked why the hacker only liked pictures of her. I told her the hacker had good taste. Somehow, that got me a date. We've been together for 2 years, and she still calls me the I obeyed a stranger's mom on my first date. We had just finished dinner and were getting up to leave. At the table beside us, a toddler started climbing out of his chair. His mom suddenly shouted, "Sit down!" Without thinking, I dropped straight back into my seat. My date stared at me. The waiter stared at me. Even the toddler stared at me. And then everyone started laughing. I waited until the family left before I stood up. I tried to prank call my girlfriend and accidentally called my mom. The second she answered, I used my deepest voice and said, "This is the police." Then I told her she was under arrest for being too attractive. The line went completely silent. Finally, she said, "Is this my son?" I checked the screen and nearly dropped my phone. I hung up without explaining. That night, I had to eat dinner with both of my parents. My dad still calls me off. I pretended I didn't know what a potato was to impress my girlfriend's parents. At dinner, her dad pointed at my plate and asked if I'd ever eaten one. I stared at it and said, "Is it supposed to be warm?" They explained potatoes to me like I had just arrived from another planet. Then her little brother handed me fries and asked, "So what are these?" I panicked and said, "Potato babies." Nobody laughed. Her dad quietly took my plate away. I pretended to hear my coworkers talking about me, and they immediately apologized. We had just finished a late shift when I left the restaurant and started heading home. Halfway there, I texted one of them, "I can hear you talking about me," pretending I was still outside. She replied, "I'm so sorry." Then everyone else started apologizing too. I hadn't heard a single word. And to this day, nobody will tell me what they said. I shredded a woman's resume in front of her during a job interview. The interview actually went perfectly, and when we stood up, I smiled and said, "It was great meeting you. We'll let you know." Then, without even thinking, I started tearing her resume into pieces and dropping it into the trash while she watched. She looked absolutely horrified, but I was still smiling like everything was normal. About 15 seconds after she left, I finally realized what I'd done. I didn't reject her, but I definitely made it look I changed my Wi-Fi name to I Can Hear You. The next morning, my neighbor knocked on my door. He didn't ask about the Wi-Fi. He just said, "I'm sorry." I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. I never changed the name back. My landlord texted me, "Please stop checking the attic." I froze. I'd never been in the attic. I replied, "What attic?" He never answered. I moved out 2 weeks later. I threw a steak out a window at my wife's boss's dinner after my wife spent all week telling me to please make a good impression. Dinner actually started great. Her boss was laughing. My wife looked relieved, and then the steak came out. Mine was basically still mooing. I didn't want to insult her boss. I didn't want to make a scene. And then I saw an open window. My brain said, problem solved. When her boss went to the kitchen, I grabbed the steak with my bare hand, stood up like a criminal, and launched it out the window. Perfect throw, until my wife looked at me like I had just ended our marriage. Then her boss came back and said, "Why is there steak on the neighbor's balcony?" I had no plan, so I looked at my empty plate and said, "That was incredible."
I used to think I was an only child. Then I found a box of birthday cards my mom hid. There were 18 of them. No return address, same handwriting, same sentence. Tell her when she's ready. Inside the last card was a photo. My mom holding 2 babies. On the back it said, "The girls, 1998. I was born in 1998, but my mom only brought 1 baby home. When I asked my aunt, she went silent, then whispered, "Your mother should have told you."